There's no other way to manage your finances effectively other than with a budget. A calendar is just a budget for your time. And so when people are like, I don't want to do that. Well, they also don't, those same people don't love tracking everything in their budget, and they don't know how much they have to spend. And sometimes they've gone over their expenses. No judgment. I'm just saying, if you want to know how much you can spend and invest and save and tithe and do that, it requires a budget. You need a budget for your time.
Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Simply Strategic Ministry podcast, where our goal is to help you grow your ministry through simple strategies and scalable systems. Today on the podcast, we have somebody who, is one of the guys I've been wanting to talk to for literally years. His name is Frank Bealer. Now, Frank and Jessica Bealer, his wife, have had a fantastic ministry career, and they are just getting started. Jessica Bealer has written some incredible books on kids ministry and leading volunteers. Frank was also the family pastor at Elevation Church for years and has been on with Orange, and now does several different things, including leading. He's the CEO of Phase Family Centers, which utilizes the Orange philosophy of it's just a phase, and the child development and this idea of coming alongside as being another person coming alongside families. And they're actually building centers that are not only good for the community, but also house incredible churches. This guy is just a fantastic guy to talk to. And I found out that he is actually from literally where I'm recording this podcast, which I did not know until talking to him. But I really think this podcast is going to be great today, especially if you are someone who likes to juggle a lot of balls, likes to spin a lot of plates at one time, and is trying to create a strategy for themselves to lead themselves better. And so I think you're going to be really encouraged and also probably be given a lot of ideas from this podcast. But he wrote a book called The Myth of Balance. And I would say that book has been one of the most helpful books I have ever read. And you can sit down and read it in probably about an hour. In fact, when I went through a season where I was pretty unhealthy in ministry, this book kind of gave me a framework for building back my life in a more sustainable way. So I think if you're interested in self-leadership systems, this is going to be a really valuable podcast. But I want to remind you too, at Simply Strategic Ministry, we are a coaching company, and we like to bring other world-class coaches and thought leaders to you to hear. We also love to coach you. We do a wide variety of coaching at SSM, but really all of the different types of people that we coach are all around this idea of how we doesn't matter what your denominational background is or what your church is like, but how do we help you, or how can we come alongside to help you put in place really effective strategies, simple strategies, and then how do we build systems that can scale as you grow? Our team of coaches has several openings right now. I have a few openings at the time of this recording. Patrick has a few openings, and our newest coach, Zach Jernigan, who specializes in student ministry coaching, has some as well. We would love to jump in and begin coaching with you and help you build. That's what we're all about, and that's what this podcast is about today. So if you would like to jump in, we always schedule a free coaching call to hear your needs and hear how we can help. And then we'll figure out what the best path is for you, and then we'll start building together. So if you'd like that, go to simplystrategicministry.com/coaching. So let's jump into the podcast. All right. Well, I'm excited to be talking with my new friend, Frank. Frank, how are you today, man?
I'm great, Landon. How are you?
I'm great. And here's the greatest thing about Frank is he is a East Tennessee guy. We both bleed orange, I believe. You still bleed orange?
Absolutely. Go Vols.
Right. Bleeding orange means we bleed a lot. So go Vols. But yeah, I actually on the call realized that Frank grew up in the city that I live in, and literally like the community that I live in as well. So, but so you've done a lot of things. You've read, and we're going to talk about one of, honestly, this is such an awesome podcast episode for me because your book, a short little book, The Myth of Balance, was really, really just revolutionary for me when I read it. And so I've always wanted to talk to you. And but what are you doing now? What is you've been through different iterations of ministry. What is your current thing that you are laboring towards?
Yeah, thanks for asking, man. And so cool. I don't know that I've ever met someone in ministry from the town we grew up in that's not somebody like I knew like before
Yeah,
I left, right?
yeah,
Before I moved to Charlotte and then Atlanta. And so crazy. I mean, it's the odds of us being from the same small town is crazy.
absolutely.
When I was there was only one red light. I don't know how many red lights there are now, but
There's
there was
more.
one
There's
when I
more.
grew up there.
It's
Okay,
packed
still
now.
just one. Okay. There's more. It's getting crazy down
Yeah.
there.
Hmm.
Um, Hey, so yeah, I get to do several things. I founded a company called Phase Family Center,
Yeah.
which helps churches think through multi-use strategies. So how do they use their building during the week for co-working and events and
Hmm.
preschool and things like that. So love
Yeah.
that. Our first location's in Atlanta. Our second location's with Mark Batterson, a friend of mine
Yeah.
up in DC, great pastor and leader. And then now we have 8 or 10 other locations in development in Texas and North Carolina and
Awesome.
Maryland and all over the place.
Yeah.
So
That's
super
cool.
fun getting to do that. In addition to that, I get to work with an organization called Generis,
Hmm.
helping churches figure out their like giving strategy and how they operate as far as just funding their vision and mission. Super
Yeah.
fun. I get to do that. And then I serve at a church called Home Church, which is a 2-year-old church plant by Gerald Fatty Great
Yeah.
pastor and leader. If you don't know him, look him up.
Yeah.
He's a dear friend. And so I have a made up title. I don't even know what my title is. I'm basically like an executive pastor type role. But just, man, just help him work on systems and ops as they've grown from like zero to, I don't know, 550, six
Yeah.
hundred people
I've
over the
watched
last
that church from
couple of
when he
years.
announced at North Point that he was stepping away,
Yeah.
and it's been really cool to just watch it on socials.
Dude, so good and loving what God's doing. And we actually do something really unique at the church. So one Sunday a month we call 4 Day,
Okay.
FOR, just inspired by Jeff Henderson's book,
Yeah.
For, a great ministry leader. But we take off of traditional worship services and spend the weekend serving our community on a Sunday morning once a month. It's a unique method. It's not for every church. We get that.
Mm.
But dude, it was cool. We had a Spanish speaking service last week. Got to have a market and serve low income
Wow.
families. We meet in a Title I school, just huge need in our community. So, man, super dope. I get to do that. And
That's
so,
awesome.
I don't know. There might be some other stuff, but that's most of what takes my time. Yeah.
So I was telling him before we got on the hit record. So I think I was first introduced to you probably, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, and you were on a podcast with Carrie Newhoff, and you were talking about the pace that your life was running at, and how you manage things. And I literally sent it to my wife. I was like this guy. I was like, this is like what it sounds like in my head right now. And this guy's like a decade or so ahead of me. And I'm like, maybe I can be this crazy and still figure it out. And so I love you got a bunch of plates spinning, but I would imagine that really energizes you in a lot of ways too.
Oh, for sure. Super life giving,
Hmm.
privilege to get to spend time with you and just invest in other leaders and help people go further faster.
Yeah.
It's like my calling of just
Yeah.
helping ministries, helping organizations and leaders just do more with what they've got, try to see around the curve. Man, I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. And I think, you hit it right at the beginning. I think that co-use of space is the future.
Yeah.
I mean, I am so a believer in that. And I mean, it's just ridiculous that churches will be $15 million in debt for a building they use 80% of the week. Or if they use 20% of the week, it's empty
Yeah.
80% of the time. And it's just like, man, we could be so much better for our community if we would think through that way. And so
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, ultimately, gosh, if we can be one way, not the way, but one
Mhm.
way to help
Yeah,
churches figure it out and explore what it looks like to just serve their community and become more of
yeah,
the center of the community, much like if you read Tim Keller on Center
mhm,
Church or
yeah,
you read Mark Batterson's stuff about being in the heart of the community and being
mhm,
intentional about it. Um, yeah, I love it. We need to make sure we do it in such a way that it doesn't become a distraction from the
yeah,
mission and sharing the gospel,
yeah,
but it becomes a support and a strategy to help us do more of that.
yeah.
But if we can get it right, man, God's got great things
Mhm.
in store for it.
For
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Well, okay. So to kind of, we talk a lot about simple strategies, scalable systems at SSM in our coaching, and we like to kind of get into the practical. And so I think what originally had me reach out to you is I talk to guys nonstop, and primarily we coach a lot of youth pastors,
Okay.
mostly youth pastors. And so I've talked to a lot of youth pastors who were like me when I first picked up Myth of Balance, that were kind of in the first big tension point of their adult life, where they're trying to figure out, because usually in that 20 to 30s window, they are usually the most potent in their youth ministry career.
Hmm.
They're young, they're cool, they got all the energy in the world, and so things are beginning to grow, but then they also don't know what they don't know yet, of how to. They start having kids, they get a mortgage, life just begins to get heavy, and a lot of guys get crushed. I was kind of in that phase. I was in that phase to where everything was going really well, but I wasn't ready for it in a lot of ways. And so, talk to me about why you wrote this book, and give us just the quick 1 minute idea of the myth of balance, because I just love to remind everybody. I'm just trying to find balance. I'm like, well, balance is a myth. Tell us why balance is a myth, just for those who aren't familiar with your writing.
Sure. Yeah, man. And by the way, I created a resource a few years ago, like a workbook supporting thing for the book. I'm going to send that to you as a
Yeah,
PDF. And then if you
please.
want to share it with your listeners or
Yeah.
whatever, just
We'll,
free. I mean, just like I'm
yeah.
not giving you, like you distribute it on your channels or
Yeah.
whatever, but
We'll
man,
drop
if
it
that
in
would
our
help
Substack.
people, yeah, whatever you want to do with it.
Yep.
It's cool. Um, so, myth of balance. It's simply this idea that I spent a long time pursuing balance and I'm very disciplined. I'm very productive. I'm very organized. And I would look at my calendar and it felt like I was balanced for a few minutes and then I'd
Hmm.
be off balance again. I was like, what? I don't understand. I'm very disciplined. I should be able to do this. And I couldn't find it. And what I realized was life is kind of like this pendulum that's swinging from one side to the other, work to personal, work to personal. And so you only find balance when you're unemployed, or you have all the time in the world and no one else needs you. Like, so yeah, you can be really balanced when all of your family is on vacation with some other people and you're at home by yourself for a week. You can feel like you're really on top of things. Or when you don't have a job and all you gotta do is take care of your family and be around because you're unemployed. Yeah, you can feel balanced. But I just challenge the notion that in living in those tensions, that we can just find this dialed strategy and rhythm that just we can stay on top of all the time and
Hmm.
stay consistent, because there's always things that are throwing us off balance. And so the book is around this idea of you have your regular things, your sporadic things, the things that are going to come up in your life, not all the time, and they're going to come up again, but they don't come up in a consistent pattern, and then the unexpected.
Yeah.
And if we don't figure it out, the sporadic and unexpected are just going to completely get us to an unhealthy place.
Yeah.
So the idea is, how can we plan better, like manage our rhythm, manage our normal day-to-day stuff, knowing that there's other stuff on the way, other challenges along the way. And so
Hmm.
recognize that when the sporadic comes, we need to have answers and plans for it. So the things we know they're going to happen, we just don't know when they're going to happen next. How do we plan accordingly for those and prepare? And so came up with this idea of when this, then that. And let's just, if we're married or in a serious relationship, let's ask our partner, okay, how would you to do this? Like, how do you want to handle this the next time this comes up? What would set you up for success?
Yeah.
And what I found was just a little bit of effort can make everybody feel good about that sudden kind of thrown off schedule or
Yeah.
that next
Yeah.
lock in, or when I go away for a camp for 4 days,
Yeah.
what can I do to set my spouse or my kids
Yeah.
up for success? Being intentional along the way. So
Yeah.
that's the heart of the book.
Yeah, that's good. So the win this then that rules were something that my wife Leanne and I we literally put into place in our life, because we were just finding that in a growing ministry you were gone a lot, and
Right.
you just and the count, we weren't in control of the calendar either.
Yeah.
We were in control of our space on the calendar, but even then. And so when you guys, what were some, like, give us some examples of some things that, what are some examples of that you've put into
Sure.
your own life or you've coached people to do?
Yeah, one of my favorite ones is when we were spending our time at Elevation Church in Charlotte, we were part of the final interview process of interviewing new staff members. So a pretty
Yeah.
rigorous process. They'd go a whole weekend. Some people they survived the weekend, but they weren't going to be employed afterwards, and
Yeah.
so there was no reason for a final interview with us. But then
Hmm.
some people would make it through, and so suddenly we'd realize that, hey, that interview that was potentially happening on Tuesday night, that's happening. Oh, by the
Yeah.
way, we were gone Saturday night for
Yeah.
ministry. We were gone Sunday night for ministry. We got a plan Wednesday night, and now we got something Tuesday night
Mm.
for a couple's dinner with my wife and I.
Yeah.
And I just remember looking back, and my kids, they used to be bummed by the fact that we were going to be gone another night, and I was kind of a babysitter, an intern, or somebody help me out and watch the kids. So we made a new rule, and that was when we have an interview, the kids go to the same restaurant. They sit at a separate table. My kids were a little older, and they got to order an appetizer. The only time
Mhm.
they got to order an appetizer was when we went on an interview. So suddenly, what used to be a negative thing, another night away, became a total blessing. In fact, I would call the kids and say, hey, we've got another interview tonight. And they're like, yes, we got an interview, because now they get to go order an appetizer. And it also created a countdown to where that interview was going to last about an hour and 15 minutes before the
Yeah.
kids melted down and were like done sitting on their own. Maybe I could get that long. So it meant we had to be intentional with our time. And now it was something special and fun for our family rather than being negative.
Yeah.
So instead of coming up last minute trying to figure that stuff out, that was a plan we had before we even scheduled the next interview.
Yeah, I love that. Especially like we're in the, those in our community know we're in the middle of the church planning phase for our family. And, there's all kinds of extra things that we're doing nonstop. And
Yeah.
we're just like, we just keep like praying and asking God, like, hey, we want this to be fun for our kids right now. We don't want them to be seen as like, oh, they're just, they're owned by the church.
Right.
You got to be here for this. And we're trying to think through those things. I love that. And because a lot of the guys I talk to who, maybe, because there's some people who marry a spouse who maybe kind of understand ministry and kind of what that is
Yeah.
like a little bit more than maybe some others who are just thinking never really had ministry on their radar.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a really hard kind of learning curve there for a lot of people. And so, I know your wife is heavily involved in ministry, has written some incredible resources.
Yeah.
But what was that journey like for you all to embrace that as a family?
Yeah, I think one of the things was we had to talk. I know this is crazy, but
Mhm.
as a family, we needed to talk, husband and wife, and understand what her expectations were of certain circumstances that would come up and what mine were. Because honestly, sometimes they were different. I would feel guilty sometimes for doing something or being away from the family, and
Yeah.
she would be like, oh, that's no big deal at all because we're already doing this. That doesn't affect anything at all. That's fine. And I'll be like, oh, I was carrying that as a heavy weight. And then there'll be something else that I thought was not a big deal at all, but
Uh-huh.
was huge to her. And so sometimes I was feeling guilty, carrying the wrong weight, or getting hung up and trying to solve the wrong problems because we weren't communicating. What I was
Mhm.
finding out was, like, for example, early on, if I had a busy Sunday and if I tacked on a lunch on Sunday, that was super hard on her. Okay.
Yeah.
Cause it'd already been a long day. She'd already got the kids up, got ready, or whatever it may be. It was just a long day already. She would have rather me come home, be around the family for a little while, give her a little bit of a break, and then go back out for a Sunday night dinner or something else. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, oh, well, I'll just tack it on at the end. That way, when I'm home, I'm home. And that was actually not a good solution, but I came up with that solution by myself. And so one thing that's super important is figure out what's best, talk about where the
Mhm.
tensions are and what could be a little bit of relief. They will change over time. What
Yeah.
is a good solution today will not be a good
Mhm.
solution for your relationship 2 years from now. So you've got to do this on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But I can't emphasize enough, you problem solving and trying to figure out and read your spouse's mind is going to get you in trouble, and you're going to end up solving the wrong problems.
Yeah, man, that's good. That's so it's such a I mean, it's such a simple, I mean, because that is, that whole idea, that framework, it really is a system. It's just a simple
That's right.
little system you've put in your
Mm-hmm.
life. We talk a lot about SSM. One kind of area of coaching we do is just what we call self leadership systems, and and so when I first kind of went into that, if when this then that, which kind of took me down a path of continuing that, of even building out a little more of kind of a rule of life for our family, and even different team rules of life that we've gone through. My question is, because I mean, your children now are probably older, and so what, that comes with all kinds of new scheduling,
Sure.
dilemmas and things like that. So what have been some of the self leadership systems that have really kind of kept you at a, what I would just say, you're able to spin a lot of plates. You're doing stuff with Generis, you're doing stuff with Phase Family Centers, and you're in a church plant. So what have been some of those self leadership systems outside of just some of that original stuff that we've already talked about that have kind of kept you at peak performance in
Yeah,
ministry?
I'll tell you one that's been really, really significant for me. That it's only been over the last couple of years that I realized how important it was, to be
Uh-huh.
honest, um, because it was just how my brain worked, and I didn't realize that it was maybe not a normal behavior. And that's this:
Okay.
people don't realize how long their tasks and responsibilities actually take,
Okay.
because especially in ministry, we keep getting interrupted. And so we'll take that phone call, we'll send that text real quick, we'll walk over to the bathroom, we'll do this or that. So whether it be a message prep or
Uh-huh.
curriculum prep or sending the team volunteer email, whatever it
Hmm.
may be, we don't know how long things take. And so for me, I've done this for a very long time. Like since early 2000s, I would build a calendar and schedule all my tasks. So I didn't have a task list. Tasks should be attached to time. It takes
Yeah.
time to do all the tasks. So I
Uh-huh.
would go through an exercise where I would schedule all my tasks and I would put time allocation to that task.
Hmm.
Then, if let's say that a friend called and needed help in ministry, I get on the phone with them and I'm not doing that task. Now I have to see the fallout of that decision of taking that phone call. So now I've got to move that task somewhere on my calendar. Then the other thing I would do is retroactively, before I left every day, I would look back and see, did any of the tasks I have scheduled, did they needed to be, were they actually longer than what I had scheduled or shorter? And
Hmm.
what it taught me to do very early, and it's been consistent now for 2 decades, is I have gotten really good at understanding how long things actually take. And
Hmm.
there's some old famous line: people underestimate what can be done in a lifetime, but overestimate what can be done in an hour or whatever,
Yeah.
right? The same is true in ministry. We get cranking. So what ends up happening in ministry is, for most of us, we choose relationship, and relationship schedules get squishy, and that lunch that was supposed to take an hour took an hour and a half, and that
Hmm.
impede on your time. So what ends up happening is your tasks, curriculum prep, emails being sent out, get pushed to evenings and weekends into family time.
Hmm.
Well, that's just because you're bad at scheduling. Okay. Like be more disciplined. And so for me, I want to put, oh, I have to leave by 12:30 from this lunch because I've got to get back to the office and do an hour of curriculum prep. Because if I don't, I have to do that on Thursday night. And consciously, am I making the decision? I'm going to do that instead of hanging out with my family. And so seeing the fallout of our decisions by
Hmm.
managing our calendar more effectively. If this isn't how you're wired and that would make you throw up to see just every box on your calendar full all the time, do it in 2 week increments. Do it for 2 weeks,
Okay.
then take a break. You'll just start to learn how long things really take. And I
Yeah.
promise you, it's a game changer. And if you're not doing it that disciplined, then you don't actually know.
Okay. All right. So you've worked with lots of different staffs, whether it's in church world
Mhm.
or in nonprofit world. One of the things as I'm coaching people through things like this, because that's exactly, I use a project management software to do a lot of my tasks, but I time my
Mhm.
task in a lot of ways. I know exactly, it's
Yep.
yeah, and so um I love that whole system. When I talk to people, who are, let's just say, maybe not as, I'm a not as a number 3 on the Enneagram as me, or not as type A as
Yep.
me, or whatever, um, they'll say, I just couldn't live my life like that. But then they are upset that they're not very productive as well. So
Mhm.
how are and I get there are people who are very, have complete different neurodiversity than me,
Sure.
who are very productive and are very effective with their life. How are you
Yep.
actually like talk to the leader who maybe wired more like us, but has those people who are more, relational and less task oriented? How are you coaching them to think this way when like putting things on a calendar even overwhelms them at all? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
I
They
struggle to
need,
coach people like that.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. At the end of the day, they need to do it in 2 week segments. Do it
Okay.
for 2 weeks and then don't do it for 2 months. I don't care. Get your stuff
Uh-huh.
done. Like do it
Yeah.
however, relational way you want to do it. Every once in a while, you've got to get back to do it. And let me tell you why. Those relational people, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that we're talking about, that we've got to coach up.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other way to manage your finances effectively other than with a budget. A calendar
No.
is just a budget for your time. And so when people are like, I don't want to do that, well, they also don't, those same people don't love tracking everything in their budget and they don't know how much they have to spend. And sometimes they've gone over their expenses. No judgment. I'm just saying, if you want to know how much you can spend and invest and save and tithe and do that, it requires a budget. You
Mm-hmm.
need a budget for your time. Some people are able to just keep those numbers in their head.
Mm-hmm.
Most people aren't able to do that. They need a little bit of discipline. So,
Yeah.
where I think people get it wrong, okay, as ministry leader, let's say you have some task management software that you really like.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to impose that on everybody, you're in trouble
Yeah.
because they're going to be miserable and that's not how they want to run their life and that'll stress them out.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody needs to have a calendar. And even if it's once a quarter, they're required to spend 2 weeks straight scheduling their time. And once again, we're just trying to figure out where's their time going. Because here's what
Mm-hmm.
happens. Lenny, you'll have a ministry leader that says, I'm maxed out. I'm fried. I'm doing my best I can. I feel like I work every night. And they're like, can you help me? And my response is, if you don't track it for 2 weeks on a calendar, I don't know how to help you.
Yeah.
Because it's like telling me, can you help me with my budget? I know how much I make.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, where are your expenses going? A little bit everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to help that.
Yeah.
That's what happens with a ministry leader. So you want me to help you with your time and figuring out how you can stop doing stuff in the weekends and in the evening when you're trying to be with your family? No problem. All I ask is for 2 weeks, you track your time and document where things are going. And if those lunches go long or whatever, be really disciplined of when
Mm-hmm.
you're doing what for 2 weeks. Then you can stop. But at least then I can say, hey, I see a pattern here. I don't know if I mentioned this in the book or not, but I have this productivity hack of when people go to lunches or breakfast or coffees with people. Here's how I started doing this at Elevation when I was like maxed out schedule and had way too many
Yeah.
one-on-ones and was just going
Yeah.
so fast. Um, I would schedule 2 lunches back to back and they would both be 45 minutes long. So I would have a lunch that started at 11:30 and I would literally sit down at 11:30 and say, "Hey, by the way, hey, I'm so excited to get to meet with you. Just so you know, I've got somebody else meeting me here at 12:15." And like I know it's going to be super awkward cuz like you're going to get up and leave and I'm not going to leave.
Yeah.
I'll get the bill, don't worry about it. But I didn't need to meet with somebody else. I didn't want to bump you a few more weeks. So
Mm-hmm.
this was my way of doing that. I've never had somebody embarrassed or frustrated by that. So what would happen would be, and I would say this to my ministry team, hey, you know that hour and a half lunch you just had with so and so? Wasn't that awesome? And they'd be like, oh, it's so good. I
Okay.
did 2 of those in the time you did one.
Yeah.
And it was just as good relationally, and we just
Uh-huh.
got to it. Now, every once in a while, you need to have that long lunch and let it
Yeah.
breathe, and somebody's got lots of emotions and stuff. But
Yeah.
when you're just like checking in on people,
Uh-huh.
Make it two 45-minute lunches. If you put 45 minutes on your calendar and still go an hour and a half, it was not a 45-minute lunch. It was still an
Yeah.
hour and a half, no matter what was on your calendar.
Yeah.
And I think helping ministry leaders see where their time is going, suddenly they realize that the trade they're making is to be more relational during the day and give up on the relationship at their home in order to do more tasks.
Man, that's a word, dude. That's a
Bazinga,
really
right?
I love I mean that's such a like it's so much of productivity and so much of just being better at what you do is just in the little 1% tweaks. Like that's a small tweak that many ministry leaders could change today and they would be double the productive at their lunch hour. Now I might be 100 pounds overweight because I'd eat two lunches. I would go to dessert at one and I'd go but that's really really helpful. Okay, so looking back, how many years you been in ministry now?
Started in 98.
Okay,
It's
were you
26 years.
okay? So were you always like this?
No.
When
That's a
did you hit the
great
wall?
question.
When did you hit the wall? When did you
When did I hit the wall?
that made you change?
I did, yeah, I didn't hit the wall that way.
Okay,
I mean, just being honest with you, um, I like grew up in a very difficult home environment, chip on my
yeah,
shoulder, gave my life to Jesus at 17 at a little teeny Baptist church right down the street from your house during an interim pastor, preacher, that was there, like an interim pastor at a small Baptist church when like nobody's supposed to give their life to Jesus. I gave my life to Jesus and got baptized like under this interim pastor. The church had like 50 people coming because nobody knew who the new pastor was going to be, the whole deal. Um, I've started running passionately toward the Lord. Overall, pretty intelligent guy. Like I
yeah,
had that going for me, but I didn't have anybody cheering me on saying I could be something. Um,
hmm,
they were happy with what I already was. Like nobody was pushing me,
well,
and I started to get and it got unhealthy. I mean, honestly, driving too hard.
yeah,
I got in the business world there in Clinton and Oak Ridge, your neck of the woods,
hmm,
and I got very efficient at selling and working and grinding and then doing ministry on the weekends. And I had to, out of necessity, um, figure out a way to juggle it all. And
hmm,
I think my brain worked that way. If I were to hit the proverbial wall, not from a burnout standpoint, but
yeah,
an unhealth standpoint,
yeah,
first time was once we had our third child. And I realized that like my marriage had gotten a little rocky because I was just on the grind and I was getting so much affirmation at work that I was just like wanting more of that and choosing that over my family. And
yeah,
so that was wall number one was, oh, we're getting a little sideways in our marriage, not unraveling, not coming to an end,
yeah,
but like it wasn't healthy.
hmm,
So that was challenge number one. Then we moved to Charlotte. Because we had acquired a couple companies over there, ultimately left all that to go full-time ministry for the first time.
hmm,
Didn't hit another wall until phase during COVID, um, when I was sitting in this massive 62,000 square foot facility, paying staff to stay home, and just believing that it was all going to work out, and just mentally was exhausted.
yeah,
But I'll say this: my efficiency was out of a desire to steward well what God had entrusted my care
hmm,
and to prove everybody wrong.
yeah,
I mean, Landon, on a weekly basis, I'm
hmm,
in some meeting that I can't, candidly, I'll tell you, I don't belong there. I'm looking at these ministry leaders. They're all people I look up to. And I'm like, one of these is not like all the others. And I'm still waiting on the day they're all going to find out. Like, I don't belong at these meetings. I don't
yeah,
belong with these leaders. Super grateful. Hopefully
hmm,
that chip's been knocked off my shoulder. I've
yeah,
grown a lot. But I think it was that drive that
mm,
led me to efficiency and then God softening my heart to realize that like yeah, be efficient, but not at the expense of other people or relationships. So my wall was kind of different. I didn't hit
Yeah.
that wall of like everything's going to unravel and I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just being
Yeah.
honest.
That's great. No, I really appreciate that, man. And I hate we had to you had to go through some of that, and I hate anytime I hear somebody say there was nobody really like pushing me and believing in me. I'm just like, man, that's why we like. I don't know what it was, but I don't know if it's just a generational thing, but we, just there's a lack of coaches. There's a lack of, even spiritual fathers in a lot of ways that are just trying to help move people along. And,
Mm.
there's a lot of great managers and, that kind of generation of like the Jack Welches that were all about, eliminate the bottom 10% and
Yeah,
push them forward. But I like, hey, how can we inspire people to say, hey, this is, you're not to look at your calendar, look at your time and your budget and just say, hey, dream what you could be and let me help you get there. Like that's one of the reasons why I like to coach people, is not because I think I'm a great coach, just because I like to believe in people and say, hey,
yeah,
I think you can do a whole lot more with what God has put in you if you'll just be a little more strategic about it. And
that's right. And just
I love,
encouraging people,
yeah.
letting them know they're doing better than they think they are. A lot
Hmm.
of times it can feel like you're losing if you're missing a bunch of deadlines or you're struggling with your schedule. And what's happening is they're probably crushing it in 5 areas, and there's one or two things that they've got to tweak that would be a game changer, and
Yeah.
helping find those things. It's so funny. My son, I have 6 kids, ranging from 22, that's our adopted son, so 22, 21, 18. My only daughter 16. Then we took a break and then we ran it back, so now we have a 2.5 year old and a 6 month old, so we got a
You're
pretty wide
crazy. You're
range.
crazy.
So much fun, man. So much fun. But my 18-year-old, we just dropped him off this last weekend at the time of this recording. He's going to go play college ball at this Christian university in Florida called Southeastern.
Yeah.
And sometime in high school, I would help him coach, and I would be there for every game and as supportive as I could be. But at some point along the way, like if he was missing a shot or he was trying to improve it, I couldn't see what he was doing wrong. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
everything looked right and he would miss it. And I was like, I need somebody else with a fresh set of eyes that can just coach those little tweaks. And I'll never forget, Isaac was in a training session with this shooting coach in Atlanta named Rudy. And Isaac said, Coach, I've had a terrible run at the free throw line in AAU. And he's like, I don't know what it is. I work on it all the time. I do my form shots. I do all my stuff. And Rudy said, let me watch some shots. And he just stood behind them, walked over to the side, and he goes, oh, just do this first. And he did the weirdest thing. Adam set his ball on his knee and like hold the ball, rest the ball on his knee, but have his hands in the proper position and then adjust and shoot. He literally went 25 of 26 after the guy said the one thing. I watched it. I filmed it. Like it was funny. He just literally just didn't miss again. And I was like, I don't even know what he saw, but Isaac couldn't see it and I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need a fresh set of eyes
Yeah.
going,
Mhm.
hey, no, dude, you're doing a ton right. You just got this
Yeah.
one little thing that you've got to adjust,
Yeah.
or can I give you a little perspective on this
Mhm.
or challenge you? Sometimes we need a good kick in the butt, but
Yep.
most of the time we just need a little advice to go, help me tweak that one thing. And so that's where coaching is so valuable because they help you see things that you can't see yourself.
Mhm.
And they sometimes we get in the tyranny, the urgent, and so wrapped up in what we do
Mhm.
that we lose perspective. And sometimes like going, stop doing that. It's unhealthy or unproductive. And we
Yeah.
just need someone else to say it. And then suddenly everything
Good.
changes.
That's good. Well, let's wrap up with this here. So, we've talked a lot about productivity and kind of self leadership systems. There has been, and we kind of talk about this tension a lot because I live in this tension in a lot of ways. There has been kind of a resurfacing and probably in a reaction to a lot of unhealthy systems, of like this kind of like rest, self care kind of movement,
Hmm. Yeah.
ruthless elimination of hurry, which, I think a lot of these things are really good things that need to be focused on. But what I'm kind of, as I've been working with, I'm a millennial. And so even as I'm working with Gen Z leaders, I realize that that's more of a native tongue to them in a way. And so as you are like talking to younger leaders, what are some things like in that kind of tension? I don't know if you identify that tension as well. What are some things you're like coaching them to think through right now in regards to, hey, be healthy, but work hard? Because it's kind of like, I feel like there's a tension there right now.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. John Mark, when he wrote Ruthless Elimination, great book for a certain group of people. Like it was for the people that were relentlessly hurrying.
Yeah.
And so what happened is there's tons of self-care and rest books, and I love it. We need it. We
Yep.
need it. That book was so good for me. I've read it twice. And most books I don't have time for that. I only read them once. So I've read that one twice. I needed that. I needed that reminder. Here's what I would say. Um, I see a generation that is swinging into that and going, I need that. I need that. I want to take care of myself. I don't want to go hit the wall like so and so did,
Mhm.
but they're not responsibly stewarding their rest time. And so all they're doing is watching a full Netflix series, or they're just doing like, that's not helpful. Like
No.
that's not healthy rest. Maybe there's a time where you need that,
Yeah.
but like vegging out in response to that, that's not what it's saying. It's saying that there's this cadence that we've gotten so extreme on that we need to improve, and we need to kind of get back to some sort of healthier recognition that proper rest, proper Sabbath allows us to do the other things really well.
Yeah.
Uh, I think the response has been, okay, I just need to have my time, and that's ill defined as well. And so
Mhm.
here's my thing. Make the most of the time that you have rest. Make sure that you're sleeping properly, you're getting rest, that you're taking a Sabbath. When you're working, work hard as though it's for the Lord.
Yeah.
Scripture's super clear. And I think a lot of people, when they're working in response to this, their work is a modified form of rest. And for the longest time, we had people that were their rest was a modified form of work. And so what I mean by that is they weren't resting, they were sitting on the couch while they were working on their computer and still
Yeah.
grinding all day, every day.
Yeah.
And so they were modifying work and calling it rest. My concern is that some people are modifying rest and calling it work. And it's like, no. Like when you're working, work as though it's for the Lord, but keep yourself healthy because it's a long missional journey. Like
Yeah.
you have to have both. And so if there is a way to find balance, as far as that rest rhythm, I think there is a healthy rhythm there. But
Yeah.
once again, John Mark Comer was addressing his need and his situation and saying, I see it among other leaders. You're working way too hard. So if that's not your starting point, I give you a word of caution to don't read that and go, I need to work less. I don't know. Has anybody said you've been working too hard? Like that's the reaction is our conclusion from reading a book. I think we need to read it through the proper lens. So
I,
that's where I would say the myth of balance. Landon, one of the things I messed up was I acted like when I first wrote that book that everybody was wired like me and could do the calendaring and the scheduling and just do the grind. And now I'm more like, no, you don't have to be like me, but you do need to be a better budgeter of time. So
Mhm.
maybe you do it every 2 weeks. My calendar still is like lit up, and it would overwhelm a lot of people because that's how I choose to live my life. I like to manage it that way and be organized. We still need a budget for our time. You don't have to budget the way I do. Just like some people budget using envelopes and some people use their bank account and some people use an app. I don't care how you budget your money. You need to understand overall where you're at. The same is true with time.
Man, that's a great place to wrap up. But I just got to come back to the thing that you just said. Who told you you were working too hard in the first place? Because a lot
I'm
of
not
the
trying to be mean, Landon. I'm a nice guy. I really
ah,
am.
that's That is great stuff, man. Well, that was a really good insight you brought to even just that whole thing. And I think one thing that JMC says, and I've heard others like, remember when he said Sabbath, that means you were working 6 days, not four and a half, because and you're working till noon, where you sat through a service and a half in the green room. Uh, it's
Facts.
let's get honest here. So man, that's really good. Well, Frank, thank you so much for being a voice on this podcast to our leadership community. I appreciate you. I really do. I'm glad to know we're in from the same community, and man, it's awesome to see what the Lord's done, and hopefully other Franks will be raised up as our family continues to plant churches in the same area. So, man,
Do it, man. I'll be praying for local church Knoxville and cheering you guys on. And Landon, dude, what a great conversation. Thanks for having me on.
absolutely, thank you, man. Have a good day.